One. Yo, what's going on, guys? Jan Moses here from Broth, bringing you another podcast episode. This is the special podcast that I have been teasing along with my co-host Harry for, I would say, about a month or so, and we're finally going to do it today. And I'm going to give the floor to you, Harry. Do you want to talk about what the topic of today's podcast will be?
Yeah, hey, what's up, guys? It's great to be back on the podcast. I know it's been a little bit. I haven't really been on the 2K grind as much, so that's why Jan and I haven't really been doing that many 2K podcasts, but we've actually been, like Jan said, hinting at doing a different podcast for such a long time, and now we're finally together. We have free time. We can do it. This is actually going to be a pro wrestling podcast, something that Jan and I have actually been talking about since we first met back in 2016. It was crazy how even back then we had so many different things with so many different, so many shared interests like wrestling, 2K. But I think even more than 2K, wrestling has been such a big passion of mine since I think fifth grade when I first saw my first WrestleMania. It was WrestleMania 28, The Rock against John Cena. And even though I haven't been the biggest WWE fan in the last several years, I've been a huge fan of AEW. And even though Jan, has seen multiple pay-per-views, but he hasn't been as big of a, I guess hasn't been following it as religiously as I am. I haven't missed a show in 2.5 years or whatever it is, which is so crazy. So I thought this would be a cool idea for Jan and I to do a podcast. We can talk about what we like about wrestling, the current state right now, and a bunch of other things. I would love for this to be kind of a continuous thing that we can talk about the pay-per-views coming up and all things like that. So I guess I'll ask Jan first. When did you start getting into wrestling, or when did you first start, really liking it?
Man, I really first started watching wrestling much earlier on in my life. Probably when I was in middle school, I want to say. A lot of my friends at that time were huge fans of WWE. That was back when John Cena had recently come out and debuted, and Batista had debuted as a part of Evolution. That was, I think, around the year that I think the Royal Rumble with John Cena and Batista both winning at the same time, and
Yeah.
Vince ruptures both of his quads.
His
That was
quads,
the year,
yeah.
coming into the ring. That was the first big pay-per-view that I had seen, and I just watched a couple of Friday Night SmackDowns and Monday Night Raws before that. And basically since then, just kind of like Harry said, while I don't watch wrestling nearly as much as I used to back then, I think Harry and I share a similar love for professional wrestling, and I think that's why I'm watching more AEW now because of Harry. So to answer your question, I guess it first started 2003, 2004,
Okay.
and now I'm watching other companies produce incredible wrestling content like AEW, which is really cool. I do want to quickly say at the top of this podcast, though, before I forget, that Harry and I did try to get an appropriate background for this podcast episode. Obviously, this content should be consumed audibly, not as much visually. I don't have a lot to show right now, so I just have a 2K freestyle screen and there's nothing going on it, so pay that no mind. The hope is that in the future, once I get a functional OBS system up and running for myself, that I'll be able to, kind of the way I did the last 2K podcast by myself, be able to show whether it's YouTube or show a match card if we're doing this wrestling podcast, and go through that and have what's on the screen match what we're talking about a little better. And the hope is that maybe if I get OBS set up, we can have Harry's face cam in there too. So a lot of cool stuff potentially on the docket. Now, since we're on this topic of generalized professional wrestling fandom, Harry, you mentioned that you're not as big of a fan of WWE now as compared to when you were younger. Do you want to talk a little bit about what changed that led you to not wanting to watch WWE as much?
Yeah, it's funny because ever since I laid my eyes on pro wrestling, I was a huge fan, watching every show. I've actually been to events. Funny story, we don't have to go into it, but I've actually met John Cena and a bunch of other wrestlers, going backstage, and it was really, I grew up with it. And I think it got to a point maybe when I first I think maybe eighth grade, like freshman year of high school. I'm trying to think what year that would be. I guess 2016, 2017. It really began to go downhill for me. Like, I think I would watch it and just complain about everything. I mean, it's like it just got to the point where it was like, you would see new guys that you would love and the crowd would like them, people like Ziggler, and they wouldn't get a push and they wouldn't be doing anything, and the storylines started to get a little like wacky and things. And like, for someone I've always appreciated about wrestling, the writing aspects and how it's like you can create such a cool and long-term storyline between wrestlers and like that, I always appreciated that. So when WWE kind of stopped doing as much long-term storyline and things wouldn't, like I said, wouldn't make sense and all that stuff, I kind of figured, it's funny because for the longest time, once that period started happening, I figured I was kind of just like getting burnt out. And I know people always talk about they stop watching it at a certain point in like high school or middle school, so I figured, maybe that's happening to me. Maybe I just like I fell out of love with wrestling. And it's funny because even back then I didn't really know of other companies. Like I had no idea about the entire world in like New Japan and like Ring of Honor and all those places. So once I stopped watching WWE, I was done watching wrestling. And I would stay a little up to date with what was going on. Like I'd watch maybe a couple of YouTube videos every now and then, trying to like see what was going on, maybe if there was something that would interest me, and it just wouldn't. Until finally, after years and years and years, I guess not that many years, I guess going into like my senior year maybe, there was talks about AEW coming on, a new company that would treat it very sports based, and everything they said I loved, from caring about long term planning and doing win loss records and really doing it for the fans, and making it seem like the fans were as big of a part of the company as everything else was, and that really excited me. And yeah, it was a couple years I think since I stopped watching, so I was really excited for it to come out, and then learning who was going to be a part of it opened up an entire new world, because I didn't hear about like Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks and all these different people. So I was really excited, and then to find out like Jericho was signing on with it, and Cody Rhodes, and it was going to be his thing. And shortly after, you'd find out that John Moxley, who was Dean Ambrose, who's like my favorite wrestler in like middle school, he was going to be a part of it. And ever since it started and it came on, I just fell in love with it again. And it's crazy to think, because now I remember, like, even back then when I was kind of getting turned off, I remember caring more about the promos than the wrestling, because like they didn't really care about the wrestling. Everyone kind of wrestled the same. And then it's like going into AEW, I kind of made me actually fall in love with wrestling. And I'm sorry if I'm going on such a tangent, but like ever since
Okay.
then, I've been like religiously watching it, like watching every match and learning about all these different guys. And what's great about AEW, like compared to WWE, is like they do things like I said, long-term planning. They do wins and loss records, so things make sense. It wasn't like a part-timer like Brock coming in out of nowhere and being rewarded a title shot, which always pissed me off, because I knew that there are so many other people who fight every week and they deserve it more. So that makes sense. And then there's such a variety of wrestling on that show. It's not like WWE where it's the same wrestling in every match and no one really stands out. I mean, not to really dive into it yet, but take the last pay-per-view that just happened, AEW Revolution, where you had like blood, and you had technical wrestling and high flying, and you had so many other things. It's like you get rewarded just for being a fan of wrestling. And I guess so. What are your thoughts on AEW? I'm sorry if that was such a long-winded rant. Rant.
No, I mean, I think that was a really good answer. I mean, obviously, I know that you're a very, very passionate wrestling fan, and I just kind of wanted to give you the floor to just go off for as long as you wanted to. I guess my vantage point from Harry is a little different, because, I mean, over the last couple of years, Harry's consumed a lot more AEW content than I have. I'm mainly watching the pay-per-views that Harry will recommend that I watch. And I think just because Harry kind of knows like what I do like in wrestling. I think both of us enjoy watching really good in-ring competition. Not as much and you want good storytelling too. Like that's what we find to be entertaining. And so whenever Harry will send me something, like, Harry knew I was a big fan of CM Punk. And when CM Punk came back, I will say like that for me was the first time that I was very much intrigued by AEW because I mean, here's the guy who has not wrestled in. I mean, prior to coming to AEW in what has it been, 8 years?
7 years, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, had a really ugly end to his WWE career with,
Oh yeah.
with Vince and the whole 9 yards, everything that happened. And for him to come back to professional wrestling and come to AEW, and yeah, he's not he's not the same nimble guy that he used to be and stuff. Like, he's obviously older and he looks older and he wrestles like, he's not the same super athletic guy he was. He's still in very good shape. And,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
your point, like, Harry pointed this out to me in the DMs a day or two ago, that at the end of his match on that pay-per-view that Harry mentioned, AW Revolution, Punk was genuinely emotional. Like, he just seemed very happy to be there. And not that that was like his final match in AEW or anything, but it's just incredible how that whole arc of CM Punk has come full circle, from him leaving WWE and then trying a different form of martial arts and now coming back to professional wrestling and being used creatively in a way where he can do what he wants to do and he's happy about it, is great. So that's the stuff that I love about AEW. Them they're putting content together that I like, which is quality storytelling, and they're putting a lot of, the wrestlers that I used to really enjoy watching before I stopped really, religiously watching professional wrestling, bringing all them together, under one roof. And then, obviously Harry knows I'm a huge, I was a big NXT guy for years prior to, me not watching wrestling as much anymore. But even then I would like watch here and there, and I was a big fan of, Adam Cole and the rest of the Undisputed Era. And when Adam Cole and now he's Bryan Danielson debuted in AEW, I think that was really the moment where I was like, holy crap, this is a special product. Like, AEW they don't just have like good talent, they truly have, no pun intended, elite talent on that roster. And it really becomes this incredible, it becomes, I think the best phrase for me to call it is a sandbox. It really feels like the world is Tony Khan's oyster, and he can do whatever he wants matchmaking wise. Like, it's funny, Harry and I were talking before we started recording about another thing which we could bring up later on this pod, which is the new WWE 2K22 game. And we were talking about the My GM mode and how it used to be. And I really feel like AEW is kind of living all of our childhood dreams of having all of these really cool, badass professional wrestlers on your roster. And you can mix and match with your creative team that roster in any which way to make incredible matches. So that's really
honestly,
when I first started liking
also,
AEW. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna also add, like, to say something about Tony Khan. I mean, like us, he is a big wrestling fan. Like, it's not like Vince, and Vince, I'm sure, was a big wrestling fan, but it seems like now he's more of a big, like, sports entertainment fan, which is fine. That's how they want to run their company. But it's like Tony Khan was like that guy who would play my GM, and I've heard him talk about using all these like online like sites growing up where he would book his own show. He actually like had the idea for Dynamite when he was in high school, just like booking his own
That's so
shows
cool.
and doing some ideas. So he really is like he's living the best life right now. He's doing what he loves, and like kind of like you said before, it's not like Vince where he's handing them a script and this is what you must say and this is how you wrestle. Like, he's letting people like Punk, who's great, he's saying, go out there and do your promo because he knows you can do it, or go out there and you want to wrestle that way, do it because it's going to get the best results and people are going to see that. And it's crazy to think like now that I was watching AEW when it first came out, because the roster back then is like you can't even compare it to them now. It's like you can. There's so many dream matches alone in their roster because of how big their roster is. So it's insane how just it's really turned into that place where it seems like most people from WWE want to come and they want to kind of explore AEW.
Yeah, I mean, I forgot exactly what that quote was that Bryan Danielson said when he joined AEW, where he wasn't saying like he wanted to come to like AEW because it was like new and stuff like that, but he wanted to go there because he wanted to be a part of something special. Like, I'm paraphrasing here, but he's basically saying that he's acknowledging that AEW was on the map and he wanted to be a part of what they were doing because he was such a fan of what they were building over there. So Yeah, I think you said it perfectly. And it's funny, just to add on one more thing, because you mentioned how you feel like WWE has gone in a different direction than AEW. I don't think I've ever really felt that difference more than when I watched the Royal Rumble pay-per-view about a week or so ago, because I have not watched any WWE content in over a year. And I always enjoyed watching the Royal Rumble. I didn't really want to watch it when there were no fans because, I live for when I'm watching wrestling content, I live for the fan reactions, like when
Yep.
that, surprise superstars music hits and the crowd goes nuts. Like that's something I genuinely enjoy about the Royal Rumble. And when I watched it back over the last weekend or, whenever, watching Brock Lesnar and Ronda Rousey win is kind of like, okay, that is like your like textbook WWE match result of like these two, big names. I mean, Ronda Rousey, she's not like, a classic WWE superstar. I can get behind that a little more, but like, it's like the same rehashed thing with Brock Lesnar winning again, versus like, AEW where it really feels like they're booking it in a way that doesn't tire out the crowd. You know what I mean, Harry?
Yeah, and the big difference is like WWE. I mean, think about it. Roman and Brock have main evented, I think, 3 other WrestleManias, and the fact that they let 2 part-timers like win like the Royal Rumble to go into Mania for the titles, it's like it's always like the same thing on repeat. When AEW they work on new talent, and yeah, they have older people like Punk and Bryan Danielson and all of them, but it wouldn't be as meaningful, and they wouldn't have wanted to come if they didn't build such a great foundation early on with people like Sammy Guevara and MJF and Jungle Boy and Darby Allin, like people who not that many people really knew about going into AEW. Now they're like the biggest stars, and they're like even on the pay-per-view the crowd was going crazy, even just like them entrancing, and they didn't even know who they were before like 2019. So it's the difference where it's like even though they do have older wrestlers, they still want their younger wrestlers to grow and grow and grow and get to the point where they can be as big of a star as someone like Punk might be in the future.
Yeah. I think that's very well said. I don't know if there's anything else I want to talk about when it comes to AEW in a general sense.
Yep.
This is our first podcast of this sort, and I know there's like a lot of different ways that we can take
Yeah,
this
yeah,
podcast
really.
going forward. For future episodes. But I do think Harry mentioned again before we started recording that we want to talk about as a one of our possibilities. We want to talk about like big time wrestling shows that the both of us watch, or maybe big time wrestling news. Like we could have, we could talk about AEW Revolution, like what happened on Sunday. We could talk about the Cody Rhodes news, or the way that that's been
Yeah.
developing. There's so many different things that we can do on this pod. And he did mention that we could also talk about certain WWE pay-per-views as well, depending on, how the pods are going, how we feel about them. I'm not sure if we're going to stray very far from AEW because I think Harry and I both enjoy the AEW content much more than what WWE is putting out there nowadays. I don't know how you feel about that, Harry. Like I was talking about
Yeah, I
AEW more.
agree. I completely agree. I think maybe if it's like a Mania or a Rumble, it would be cool to talk about. But, if it's some like rando pay-per-view that like we probably aren't gonna love, and there might be maybe one match that we speak about, it's probably not worth it. But I like take this AEW pay-per-view if that's the direction you want to go in, at least for now. Like we could talk about like most matches because I felt that was a really good show on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I want to give major shout out to Harry for telling me to watch that show because it was excellent. And I mean, for Harry to tell me to watch a show when it wasn't even like halfway done for him, like I think when you had messaged me
Yeah,
telling me to
literally,
watch
I was
it,
like 2 matches in. I was like,
yeah.
you need to watch it.
And I mean, to be fair, like those matches were honestly great. I mean, there are so many things that I saw that I liked. Like I liked seeing Chris Jericho slim down so much. It just made me
Oh my
really
God,
happy
yeah.
because I was so worried
Not
about his
even that,
health.
but yeah, not even that. But I think like I don't know if you would have if you knew, but he's been a face for like the past like I don't know, like since like early. I don't even know about early. He's been a face for a while. It's been several months. I think he plays a heel so much better, like giving the middle finger to the crowd and like shoving the referee. And like the whole thing where like in the promos leading up to it, he said that if he lost fair to Eddie Kingston, he would shake his hand, and him not doing that at the end. Like I think he has such a creative mind that I think he knows how to play a heel so well.
Yeah, I agree. But I also think, I think it's more fun. Like if I was in wrestling and I think if you were in wrestling, I think it's so much more fun to be a heel. But you can't have
Yeah, I
everyone
agree.
be heels. I think it's easier to push newer faces on the scene by being a face yourself and letting them be heels. Like what he's doing with Eddie Kingston, I thought is great. And that's the way that you should be pushing people. I feel like the only way that doesn't really work out is if you have like you could be like a well-established heel and then have like someone else come in like put you over, but or whatever. But I feel like Jericho, it's a nice change of scenery. But I'm with you. He's always been, whether it's AEW or WWE, he's always been better as a heel
Oh yeah.
than as a face. We can talk about the pay-per-view a little bit if you want. I know you were debating maybe we should do a different podcast going over the card as a whole, but I mean, we can freestyle it. How do you feel? Do you want to go over it at all?
Yeah, we can talk about it. I didn't think we would. I thought we went over the generalization of wrestling like pretty fast. So if you want, we can jump right into it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, why not? We can go over the card. Maybe tell me some of your favorite matches if you want. If you don't want to go over every single particular one.
Yeah, why not? Well, for starters, I mean, every match was great, but if I had to pick my favorites, I thought, for starters, the triple threat match for the tag team belts, which was Kyle O'Reilly and Bobby Fish versus Young Bucks versus Luchasaurus and Jungle Boy. I thought that was amazing. I mean, that's one of those matches where you know from the beginning it's going to be like very fast paced, like very high flying. It's a very fun, fast match. I thought that was awesome. Like they've really been building between like Adam Cole having to pick between Young Bucks and his new and old friends, which would be, his friends from NXT, Kyle O'Reilly and Bobby Fish. So I thought like that, like the whole like the fact that they were able to tease like a lot during their match between them two alone was great. Any Young Bucks match is going to be great. And I didn't realize, because I didn't really watch NXT, but Kyle O'Reilly in like particular is out of this world. I mean, that he wrestles so differently than anyone I've ever seen. Like his very fast paced, like strikes and everything, and just like the way he carries himself, he's amazing. So that match was really good. Um, CM Punk versus MJF was amazing. I think the storyline for that has been one of my favorites in a very long time. So that alone made the match great. I'm not the biggest fan of those like gimmicky types of matches, but I thought even the way they did it as violent and all that stuff, I thought that was great. Especially because like we really haven't seen Punk get in a position where he has bled that much or has gone through that much I guess like violence in a while. So it was cool seeing that. And then the other match before I'll let you go is I thought the Adam Cole versus Hangman match was amazing. And funny enough, I had the lowest expectations for that one just because like there's so many amazing matches. And it's one of the things where it's like I knew ahead of it there's no way Adam Cole was winning. Adam Cole's great, but I have a feeling they're saving it for MJF to beat him. But nonetheless, it was amazing. I was praying that match would literally as people like to joke around in the crowd fight forever. And you saw in the beginning that people would joke, the crowd was doing the Adam versus Adam thing, and they were kind of joking around the entire time. But once it really got down to it in the last maybe 20 or so minutes, the crowd was so into it to the point where they were booing Adam Page at one point because of how amazing Adam Cole did in that match.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll start there because you left off on that match, and that was obviously my favorite match of the card. I'm a huge Adam Cole fan, as Harry knows. I was talking him up in NXT. I feel like Adam Cole was honestly the only reason I was consuming any WWE content back when I was watching it, a couple of years ago. But seeing Adam Cole in AEW when he first debuted was really exciting, and seeing him as the headliner, on this card along with Hangman Adam Page was huge because I had no idea about any of the build for any of the matches on this card until Harry was like, "Hey, watch this show; it's really, really good." And when I saw him as as one of the main event guys challenging for the championship, I was really, really pleased, and I thought that the match delivered. Adam Cole is one of the few wrestlers that I feel like he's really, really good at making the match not boring in the parts of the match that should be boring. But when the match gets into what becomes a true glorified spot fest, where you just have super kick into clothesline into another super kick, he's so good at that. Back in NXT, you can name the opponent. It doesn't matter whether it's a guy like Ricochet, who's high flying, or a slower guy. It doesn't matter who he's wrestling against. He's so good, I feel at pacing the match in a way with his opponent where it keeps the crowd engaged, because Adam Cole, he is a main event wrestler. He's going to be in matches that are going to be going on for 30 to 60 minutes. And I think it's a really hard job to keep the crowd engaged for that period. But they did a great job. Both Adams did a great job in that match.
Yeah.
I felt like there were so many like false finishes that I actually was like believing, okay, Adam Cole's actually gonna win it here, but then he wouldn't.
I did too.
So it was a really great match.
And
Overall,
literally, I'll say one more thing.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
sure.
I mean, you saw the Kenny Omega versus Adam Page match for the title. I mean,
Yes.
like, people love this Hangman guy. I mean, like, they were praying for him to win the title for so long, and they had such an amazing story arc between him and Kenny Omega. So normally, like, AEW, when they do, especially title matches, it's always very distinct, heel versus face, and the crowd, like, they normally love the face, but they like to play along and just kind of like fuel the fire and make it so hyped up for the babyface to win. But when I saw, despite even that, when I saw Adam Cole go to the ring and do the Adam Cole baby, and the entire crowd, there probably wasn't even one fan not doing it. It looked like the entire stadium erupted with the baby, and then it was such a different vibe. It was like people really would be cool with Adam Cole beating Adam Page,
Yeah, it's really exciting. I mean, you could feel it. It's almost like there's like a cult behind Adam Cole, which is pretty crazy. But it's true. I mean, it carried over everywhere. I still remember when he debuted in NXT, and he attacked Drew McIntyre, I believe, after he beat, I think it was Bobby Roode in NXT. It was like, I don't know how many years ago. It was like some NXT pay-per-view years ago. And he did the Adam Cole Bebe. And I think there were even a few fans in the crowd that night who was doing the Adam Cole Bebe with the hands up. And it's like, these are the true hardcore wrestling fans that are knowing who this guy even is. Because I was like familiar with him, but never, that close with him and what he had done before coming to NXT. So to see him come to AEW, he clearly established himself in NXT, and I think he did such a good job of really not spending, at least I don't think he spent too much time on the main roster in WWE, because we've seen so many people from NXT go to WWE, well, go not to WWE, go to the main rosters of Raw and SmackDown and really hit the shitter, for lack of a better term, which is really unfortunate. And it's funny because now you see a lot of these NXT people in AEW, and it's like I'll see them get booed or they'll get no reaction. Like I'm looking at who used to be Andrade Almas in NXT, and I still pop whenever I see him because I know how good he is as a wrestler, because I want him to get a push. I forget who he goes as now in AEW. He was on the card, Andrade.
Yeah, Andrade El Idolo.
Yeah, there you go. Yes. So like that was his nickname, was El Idolo or whatever. But he's like a really good wrestler, obviously. But anyways, I'm really happy to see Adam Cole doing so well and making it up to the main event. This is what he should have been doing. A couple other points I really wanted to mention, because you touched on a lot of what I liked with like the Punk match, which I really enjoyed. I want to say, because you mentioned how, people were like praying that Adam Hangman Page was going to win the title. It feels like the meaning of the championships in AEW carries similar weight in my eyes to the meaning of winning a championship in like the early 2000s in WWE, where like when Batista beat Triple H in, I think it was WrestleMania 21's main event, that felt like a monumental win for him. Like winning the title was a big deal. Whereas like now, I don't really know what it really means. Like they were mentioning at the top of the Royal Rumble pay-per-view that I guess Roman Reigns had been a champion for quite some time, and like that was a really big deal, and maybe that'll help restore some value to that championship. And I don't know if it's them continuing to change the way that the championships appear, or if they just like to quickly move, who the champion is, like quickly, after a couple of months. But it just feels like AEW does a good job of making the title matches mean something.
And I'll say, it's like, speak about what I was saying before about like how WWE just stopped doing long-term planning. Like I remember even CM Punk in WWE when he had the belt for like 390 days or something like that. It's such a cool title reign. And now it seems like Vince is like, changing the storylines like every day, and it's like there could be like 10 title holders in a year in WWE or whatever it is. But AEW, there's only been 4. It's been Jericho, Moxley, Kenny, and now Hangman. So they really care about it. And adding the win-loss record, which we both agree was such an amazing idea. Now, because like even when like Bryan Danielson came and he wanted to fight Kenny Omega because both wrestlers are like, talked about today as like 2 of the greatest right now in the world, and it wasn't like Bryan could just step up to the title. They first had a non-title match. And so they really treat it. They really do treat it like it's like the number one prize that you should want in the company.
Yeah, it really does feel that way. Like, I think you and I were talking about that when we were, initially discussing the fact that they have those records in the wrestlers' like nameplates when they're entering the ring. And we were talking about how in WWE, while they've never done that, there definitely was a time, I think, again, maybe in the early 2000s or whenever it started.
Maybe, yeah.
I don't even know when it ended, but they used to have a power ranking system. And
yeah, I remember
if you
that.
remember in the old like WWE video games back when my GM was actually fun, they would like automatically assign wrestlers to championship matches based on how they did in the power rankings. Like if The Undertaker had won like every match in a row for the last month, he was going to be next in line at the next pay-per-view, on that, in the video games algorithm to get a title match. And I'm not saying that you need to win a bunch of matches to get a title match, but that does kind of seem like the organic way to do it, right? Like if you keep winning, you should get a shot at the title. And it just felt like WWE just never really prioritized that as much. Like it just felt like the pushes were never, like you said, they're never really that long term. And you were talking about the what's it called? I think your mic cut out there for a second.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Your mic had cut
I
out
kept trying
there
to
for
add
like
something, and you kept
seconds.
going. I was like, oh, wow, he wants to keep going.
No,
But,
not at all. No, if you want to add something, please go ahead. Your mic had
I was
cut
gonna
out.
add one thing. It's like even without the whole like you can come in and get a title shot, that complaint. I mean, think about it in WWE where it's like, there's like even take like normal wrestlers who like the mid carders for example. It's like if they're not trying to go for the WWE championship, it's like why are they even wrestling? You know what I mean? At least in AEW, there's a point to everyone. Whether like even if you're not gonna get like you're not gonna go 10-0 and you're go like 7-7, like a mediocre record. At least you have a goal in mind. It's not just I'm wrestling just for the sake of like wrestling.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it all comes down to what I believe is just the title matters more in AEW and in WWE. I mean, I feel like it first started with like the mid-tier card, like championship belts. Like, I mean, I know this is an awful name to bring up in circles, but I mean, like when Chris Benoit had the U.S. title, that title really meant something, and he defended that title as if it was the world championship. Versus like now, I mean, they treat all the mid-card titles, I feel like that bootleg 24/7 title that I don't even know if it still exists, but like
it does.
Yeah, but I feel like the idea behind that is kind of the epitome of WWE's. Exactly, it's the same thing. It's the epitome of how they feel about their belts. And I say all this because while the match itself wasn't great, I really like the way they make Britt Baker feel like a box office, champion.
Yeah.
Like when she's wrestling again, that title, it kind of feels like, I mean, I know they're not on the same scale, but like, again, like comparing it to WWE back when like, a female wrestler like Trish Stratus or Lita or even a Mickie James would have that women's championship, it felt like it meant something, and that's kind of what it felt like with Britt Baker in that match. It had a big fight feel because I feel like Britt Baker made that title feel really relevant. I know you didn't talk about that match, but did you have any thoughts on that match?
I'm going to be completely honest. I wanted to get to the main event, and I skipped that match. But I will say I do love Britt Baker. I think she's awesome. I mean, the way she carries herself alone, like she's a big deal. The second you hear her music and she's coming out, and the whole DMD, it's like the Adam Cole Bebe. It's like it's funny that they're dating in real life because both of them they're heels, but the crowd just loves them because of their personality and how they interact with the fans. And I have a feeling that Thunder Rosa will end up beating her in the next few weeks because I think they're hyping up that I think Thunder is in a contenders match and they're going to be fighting. If she wins, she'll fight Britt in her hometown. So I'm guessing they'll give her the win in her hometown. But I'm sure the match was great. I definitely do want to go back and rewatch it.
No, you definitely should. I feel like the match was okay. There was a moment where like I think I don't know what their names were. The members of DMD's like faction or whatever were like coming in
Yeah,
to
right,
distract the
right.
ref, and Britt Baker was tapping out. The ref wasn't paying attention,
Oh,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
Britt got like a really underhanded victory at the last second. So I could definitely see that being, you know, the calm before the storm and leading to, you know, Thunder Rosa, I guess, winning the title over her. I keep forgetting that Keith Lee's in AEW also. Like I like Keith Lee. I'm not
Oh,
a
yeah,
big
we can
fan.
talk about the ladder match.
Yeah, that match was pretty good. I mean, I saw bits and pieces of that match because I was doing something in my apartment while I was watching that match.
Yeah, yeah.
But there were a lot of really, really nice spots. What did you
I don't
like from
know
that
if
match?
okay, this is like the most random thing, but did you see that spot where Orange Cassidy, he's like, do you know what I'm talking about? The when his face is like in the ladder, like
Yes.
in the when Keith Lee and Wardlow, sorry, when they lifted up Orange and Orange like flipped over on top and he was about to grab it, you saw the entire crowd like they all stood up in just complete awe that they were gonna let Orange Cassidy win this match. And I'm a big Orange Cassidy fan. I know he's not loved by a lot of people, but I think he's awesome. But that moment just stood out for me. But the entire thing was great. The spot where Wardlow pushed Keith Lee and it was one other person, I can't remember who maybe, oh, it was Keith Lee and why can't I think of his name?
Was that Powerhouse Hobbs, that big guy?
There we go, Will Hobbs. When he shoved him onto the table, that was awesome. The power bomb that Wardlow gave to Ricky Starks onto the ladder, that was insane.
Yeah, that was nuts.
It was a cool ladder match because you don't typically see these big guys in the ladder match, and to put Keith Lee out of all people in there, it was really exciting.
Yeah, it was really cool. I mean, I had no idea what that match really was. Like, of course, I see that and I think of Money in the Bank.
It was
When
for
I see that
a
something-
spot. It was for a contendership match for the TNT Championship.
Okay, so that's what I figured it was going to be. I thought it was going to be like some sort of like number one contendership style of match. I
Yeah.
really liked it. I liked the way that they kind of made Wardlow, who I had no idea who that was. They kind of made him feel like a big thing, and then I like that, you know, they bring him back at the very end again. So not very end. Like I think a match or two later against Punk. Where he's like on
Right.
MJF's side, but he's actually not on MJF's side. And
Well, to quickly summarize it, like he's been MJF's like in storyline, his bodyguard for the past like couple years, and they've been hinting at him turning against MJF because he treats him bad for years, and we were all waiting for this turn to finally happen, and the entire thing is like Wardlow, like every match that MJF is in, Wardlow would come in and give him the ring to hit the person and win, and so pretty much he works for MJF according to them, but he doesn't work for AEW. So it was always that MJF could fire him and he wouldn't be in the company at all. But MJF made the comment on the last Dynamite where he was like, you know what, Wardlow, like. If you win the title, but I also should have mentioned the whole thing was where even if Wardlow did win this match and then win the title, he would have to give the title to MJF. And
I see.
on Dynamite after MJF like brutalized Punk right before the pay-per-view, he was so happy and he was like, you know what, Wardlow, if you win and you win the title, you can keep it. And then MJF was like, but, you know, you probably won't win it anyways. And then Wardlow fired back with something like, he was like, oh, because I'm always too busy saving you. And MJF walked in and slapped the living shit out of him. I've never seen a slap make that loud of a sound before. So, and the fact that it was how great the long-term storyline like kind of came full circle where the one time MJF needed the ring, Wardlow, you know, couldn't find it. But then when, you know, CM Punk got him and he distracted him, he found it in his right pocket or whatever it is. So it was cool how like the long-term storyline kind of made sense in how it concluded.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, like in the moment, in a vacuum, I had no idea what was going on. Like I had assumed that like they were in cahoots. And I'll be completely honest. When I saw that ring, I thought that was his reward for getting the brass ring. I was like, oh, they gave him a ring for getting the ring.
Yeah,
It made no sense to me. And I'm like, oh, then he's giving the ring to Punk. So I didn't really know what their relationship was, but it kind of did. It in a way felt like I feel like in wrestling when booked right, any guy that has like a lackey or a bodyguard or like some sort of like stunt double, they usually do a really good job of getting the creative writing done well. Like I was I was thinking back of when the Miz had I forgot the name of the guy that he had as like his lackey. Do you remember like a few years ago? It was like 5 or so years ago. The Miz had like that guy with the big black beard as like his stunt double. And then they had like a big Mania match.
Yes, you remember every move that they would do onto him, he would do the same thing, like at ringside.
Yeah, he would do the
That was
same thing
awesome.
in ringside without anyone in front of him. It was the
Yep,
funniest
that was
thing.
great.
Yes,
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
actually the first thing that I thought of when I saw them because I was like, well, I don't know what the booking's like, but if AEW got
But
it
one
right,
thing I forgot to mention was, so the entire thing was that he works for he works for him and not the company. But
Correct.
now that he has a chance to win the title belt, he would get a contract. He would have to with the company. So the fact that they snuck in that little detail like the week before, like everything just kind of connected really well.
oh, that's awesome. I mean, like I said, I feel like if I was, more privy to the storyline
Yeah, it
beforehand,
would
I
all
would
make
have
sense.
enjoyed it even more. But I still felt like it was a really big moment. Like you could just tell, even though I had no idea what was going on, that it was a big moment.
The entire crowd went crazy during that.
Yeah, and it was Damian Sandow. That was the guy who was Mrs. Stunt Double.
Damian Mizdow.
Damian
as
Mizdow,
they
that's
said.
right. That's great. I think the only other thing I really wanted to mention from this card, on top of everything that you said, it's just so great to see Sting able to do anything in a
God.
ring again after what happened at the
Yeah.
end of his WWE tenure. When I saw him on top of, I don't know if it was like a barricade or like some sort of railing,
Whatever that was. It
and
was
I
like
forget,
a staircase, yeah.
I think it was El Idolo who was on the table. I genuinely feared for his life. Like, there's no way
Yeah.
this 60-plus-year-old man is going to jump, and then he did. And then he stood up. I thought he was gonna like jump and like go through the table, and they were gonna have to help him out of the ring. No, he like kept going. So
Literally got back up.
yeah, I'm honestly.
Oh, but also
shocked.
just to quickly bring up that I don't even know what the move is, but that flip that Sammy did to Isaiah Cassidy onto the table, whatever that like double, that was I've never seen anything like that.
I don't recall. I'd have to go back and watch it. But
Okay.
yeah, I mean they have
There
so
were some
many
cool
incredible
spots.
high flyers.
Yeah,
I mean, overall, I thought it was a really, really good card. I mean, I enjoy watching their pay-per-views. I know they don't have them as frequently as WWE does, but I feel like it kind of works in
I think that's the
AEW's
beauty
favor.
of them. They're
does.
allowed to do that long-term planning in between each pay-per-view instead of WWE where it's like one pay-per-view every like 4 weeks or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like NXT because I think NXT followed
NXT
the
did the
same
same
suit.
thing, yeah.
They had 4 major pay-per-views a year, which is great. I believe we only have about another like 15 minutes or so. I know we were talking about maybe briefly talking about WWE 2K22. It came out,
Yeah.
I think, officially today. I know that you've looked into it a lot more than I have. There is just one thing that I think you and I are both excited about, but I want to give you the floor here, Harry. What have you seen that you like about WWE 2K22, and what have you seen that you really, really don't like about WWE 2K22?
I guess we'll focus on the positives to begin. I guess it's funny enough that we're doing a podcast like this because we also have talked about my team because I don't know how this happened without me knowing, but it seems like they added a my team into the WWE 2K22. I wish I knew exactly how the entire thing's going to work, but apparently it's an offline game, which is cool because 2K also did my team. 2K13 was offline, so it's probably a good step in the direction. They're doing like Evo cards where you can upgrade based on doing things in matches, like a springboard. It's like you have to do like 7 springboards to Evo a card. Apparently there's like a domination, and they're going to do weekly stuff every week for you to grind and like build your team. And it's like they're doing like there was emeralds. I don't know if they're actually called them, but I saw like the emeralds and the rubies and the amethysts and the silvers and golds. Like I can't imagine in my brain how this is gonna work, but I think that is like so cool. Like imagine if they really do like 5v5 like wrestling fights against like other like that just sounds so cool to me. Like what are your thoughts?
I mean, I'm really intrigued to see where they go from here. I was thinking back to what you said at the beginning about how 2K13 was offline. I do remember they did have a road to the playoffs because they had a gold Michael Jordan at the end of it. But I think for me, the word that I will use with this My Team mode is it feels like just on paper, from what I've read, it's a very like innocent game mode. like my team nowadays, it feels like microtransactions are king,
Yep.
and they only want to, take money from their consumers, which is fine. Like they're supposed to make money. That's, their business model. I think a business model that is not centered around making money is going to fail. But there's a better way to do it, which is like you want to make money and also keep your customers happy, keep the people that are playing your game really happy. And I think 2K13's My Team was super simple, and it looks like the My Team, or whatever they're calling it, My Faction
Yeah.
in WWE 2K22. It looks pretty simple, and I kind of like that. Like I like that they're not trying to do all of these like bold things in this game mode. Just keep it simple and see how the community engages with it. And it was cool just seeing, a lot of the people that I follow on Twitter that, that play Mutt and My Team were all putting out videos on this. It was so cool. Like I saw like Henry the Blasian put out a video on
Yeah.
it on his second channel. It's really cool to see that people are putting this stuff out. I admittedly have not watched anything on it yet. I plan to do so tomorrow. I mentioned it, I believe, in a prior video or on stream with Shiz, but I just got an Xbox Series X. I'm probably going to get that game on there. And then, hey, I mean, now I just thought about this. If we ever do, another podcast going forward, if we can't find any good wrestling highlights to put on, I could always use OBS and put WWE 2K22
Yeah, we
footage
could.
on there just as like a fail-safe. So, but yeah, anyways, going on back to what you were saying, Harry, what have you not liked that you've heard about WWE 2K22?
Okay, so the one main thing I don't like, and I will say the gameplay looks amazing. I mean, this is also a positive, but it's like the way the combos look and like everything looks so fluid, and so everything kind of happens so just it looks organic, and I love it. But the one thing I don't like is how they hyped up bringing back my GM mode, which was like my favorite mode back in the day. Just being able, so pretty much, if you don't know what my GM mode is, it's pretty much you get to build your entire wrestling show, and you're the kind of the booker of it. You can make the matches, sign people, you can draft your roster, and everything from dealing with contracts and bringing in stuff where it's like people might not wanna they might want to leave your show, so you have to convince them to stay on, and you're getting arenas and you're doing all that stuff. I wish I could have explained it better, but it's so much fun. And after like I think it's probably been like it's got to be over 10 years since it's been in the game, like 14 years or something like that. They said they were going to bring it back, and I was so excited for them to do this. And not only is there only you can only use one title belt, which is a big letdown. You can't do tag team belts, you can't do anything like that. But you also only get 3 matches per show, and they're only like 1-on-1s, 2-on-2s, 3-on-3s, and it's like or triple threats, and it's like that's not only unrealistic, like there's never a show like that where you book like that, but it's like it so limits what you can do, the creativeness that you can really do on my GM mode when it really lets you do it all. And that really just it goes to show just how not out of touch, but how like the 2K really just they don't have the finger on the pulse when it comes down to knowing what the community wants. I mean, the fact that the fact that they could have just copied and pasted what worked in the games earlier on, years earlier, and they didn't do that blows my mind. And then to make matters worse, there's another mode called Universe Mode, which is pretty much it's kind of like a My GM mode, except like you're in charge of everything. You don't need to like you can pick your rosters, you can do that. It's like pretty much like a free world My GM where there's no restrictions, you can do whatever. They could have just copied and pasted it like they do every year, but they took out promos for some reason. Like you can't set up like wrestlers to talk to each other, which that means like you can't like set up like rivalries really. You can't like break up tag teams. So like it's like pretty much like I'm saying, the GM mode and the universe mode have taken out so much creativity that I was so looking forward to do. And this is the one year where gameplay is so much fun. So on top of that, I was so excited to play the GM mode while also playing the games or watching the games on simulation. So I'm really hoping they do patch it or they do fix it, because it seems like most people are complaining about that.
Yeah, well, hopefully they do fix that, because when I used to play wrestling games, I mean, God, like 10 plus years ago, that's what they used to pull me in with, which was the creativity of building your own card and your own matches. And I mean, like I think on the Xbox 360, like the very like old SmackDown versus Raw games, you could, I'm kind of dating myself here, you could like download music onto a CD, put the CD into your Xbox, save the music files, and then use those music files to update wrestler themes, which was, to me, was like the most cool thing. But again, that's like, That
And
was
I
in
feel
the
like
old
knowing
era.
us, like how creative we get, like we would have had the coolest podcast, like talking about like our universes and like what's going on and storylines and tag teams. Like that would have been so much fun, like in its own right.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like when I was like younger, I used to like watching these YouTubers, Gore and Perkins. They literally have, I think they may even still be doing. I have to check. I haven't looked in years. But they were like a dedicated WWE 2K or SmackDown versus Raw video game like YouTube channel, and they would
Yeah,
make
yeah.
their own scripts, and they would just do matches against each other, and it was genuinely very entertaining. And that's stuff that I kind of wish we could do
I was
in
so
this
looking for.
game mode.
I swear, I was gonna bring like a paper out. I was gonna be writing down notes and like writing down like win and loss records. I was gonna get so involved into this my own little world, but I think I'm still gonna end up getting the game. I think I'll make the best of it. I'm trying to like because I feel like stuff like Universe and My GM, it's only as fun as you make it. So I think I'm gonna view it as a challenge on My GM where you have to kind of build your own show in like it would be like an hour show technically with the 3 matches or whatever, and try to build your own storylines. But Universe will probably be still what I mainly play and just make my own little world in that. But other than that, the My Career looks really fun this year. I think that's gonna be great. The My Faction, I'm so curious how that's gonna go. So I think maybe in the future, Jan and I can even do some My Faction podcast talking about all the weekly content. And even a step further, can you imagine sniping WWE players on this My Faction game?
That is
Like,
hilarious. I mean,
there's so many possibilities.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's going to be an auction house or what the deal is, but I think
I
that
don't
would
know.
be true comedy if we were doing like a market talk video.
I sniped John Cena for 500.
Oh man, that's going to become the new Amethyst Curry snipe that I
Yeah.
missed meme. That's going to become that now.
You missed Amethyst Undertaker for 500
I
on the
would
day
be
he came out.
probably more devastated than missing that Curry snipe.
Probably.
But I feel like that's all I can really think of. Do you have any closing thoughts that you want to share, Harry, before we wrap this thing up?
Yeah, I will say I don't know how this podcast will kind of come out once we're all listening to it back. But I just want to point out this is gonna be a weird podcast. Like there's pretty much unlimited topics we could have dove into, and we didn't really have a plan as to what we were going to talk about besides like a general outlook on wrestling. So in the next podcast, once they more of like I guess like a focus, whether it's a pay-per-view or whatever it is, it'll be more like organized. You know what I mean? This was kind of just it was a lot of fun. I'm just in the future, it's obviously going to be more like we're going to have more of an outline in terms of like what to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I completely agree. We'll see how this podcast, plays out. I'm sure you and I will both listen to it, a couple times just to get a feel for it. If you're watching this and you have any feedback for us, please, let us know in the comments. I think we're gonna, churn these out whenever we're in the mood to do so. I just think, kind of like Harry was saying, we both enjoy pro wrestling, even if it's on various levels. I think we also both enjoy just talking about wrestling together. So
Yeah. Yep.
if we can, record it and make it into like an organized product and, push it out as a podcast, I'm totally game for that. And hopefully we can, like I said, come in with like more of like a game plan for like future ones. Like maybe we'll like do one that'll be a little bit shorter and we talk about, an AEW pay-per-view or a WWE pay-per-view.
Yeah,
or
where we go
talk about
down
My
like every
Faction.
match, like down the entire list, and we'll
Yeah.
share our like thoughts on it.
Exactly, like a dedicated episode to that card itself. I love that. And I'm just really happy that we were finally able to get this one out to you guys. It's definitely more my fault than Harry's. Harry's been asking me for a long time, and he's really busy too.
We've both been really busy. We've all been. I'm glad we fought. Like, and this came out so random. Like, I think literally a couple hours ago or a few hours ago. I was like, "Do you want to do it tonight?" And you're like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, why not?" So,
No, it worked out perfectly because if we didn't do it tonight, it would have been Sunday, and I feel like weekends are always kind of wishy-washy. So I'm glad we could
Yep.
get this out. Harry, thanks again for freeing up an hour of your time.
yeah, this was
on
a lot of fun.
weeknight.
I cannot wait to do I can't wait to do our next one. Sorry for cutting you off.
No, you're totally fine. And obviously, the end of season, like my team stuff, if Harry plays it and he wants to record it, he'll be on there. But otherwise, you can expect to hear Harry's voice on these kind of wrestling podcasts going forward. So Harry, thanks again. I appreciate you, man.